Legal marijuana use was made earlier this month when Colorado and Washington became the first two states to allow use of the drug. For more on the political, economic, and also social impact of this, I want to bring in Eugene Jarecki. He recently chronicled the real cost of America's war on drugs in his award-winning documentary, The House I Live In. Eugene, thanks so much for joining us. And I know you've had actually quite a few celebrities produce this documentary with you, like Brad Pitt and Danny Glover and so forth. So this has certainly been, been obviously a big deal. And when I say that with celebrities, because in California, there's been so much on legalizing marijuana. Now, what is the real economic impact when you have the legalization in Colorado and you have it in Washington? I mean, how does it really help the states themselves?
Well, right away what happens is you stop wasting the kind of money on the drug war that we waste. Marijuana arrests are a scourge in this country. They're happening in every state, every city. We have it here in New York, where stop and frisk is causing us to have 700,000 people stopped on the streets of New York every year. That's an amazing amount of expenditure on stuff that ultimately doesn't lead to much actual criminal discovery. Very rarely is there any violence discovered. Very rarely are we putting people in jail who we sort of need to put in jail. We have a misguided system in this country in the drug war in general. And so when you see legalizations in places like Colorado and Washington, what you're seeing is America start to follow the example, for example, of a country like Portugal, which 10 years ago decriminalized drugs across the board. Possession.
And how much did it save them?
It saved them billions, to be honest with you. And the savings was then very smartly deployed, because drugs at the end of the day are an addiction problem. They're a personal health problem, ultimately a public health problem. Portugal shifted its money away from criminalizing drugs and turned it into that public health matter that we all know it should be. Okay. And so they spent just a fraction of the savings spent on treatment, made one of the most robust treatment systems in the world, and the results have been spectacular.
Now, we've seen, for instance, Medbox, which I think they dispense marijuana through vending machines. I mean, we saw their stock on the back of this news, spike up, and then it went right back down again, though. But it's a very small company. But there, there seems to be some investor interest in this legalization, of marijuana. So, is this going to spur? Do you think, the fact that these two states have done this, going to spur more of this?
Remember that I spend most of my time on sort of the moral implications of this and the human rights implications, but that doesn't stop me from being very aware about where the economic incentives are.
Sure.
You
need that too.
Sure. There's been huge economic incentive in our prison industrial system. We have a system in which we incarcerate our fellow human beings for profit. This is a shock to Western other democracies in Europe. They can't believe that we do it that way, but we do it that way. When you start to think about how you could find incentives for changing it, well, sure. I had a guy stand up in a screening in New Mexico last week, and he said to me, I have a question, Eugene. He said, why would we have possibly taken an industry like the drug industry, the illegal drug industry, tens of billions a year, why did we give control of it, a monopoly over it, to thugs and cartels? Why isn't our government profiting from this and regulating the system in a smart way? And it's interesting because the British don't say legalization.
Well, but it's an addictive substance, though.
Sure, but you have it as a controlled substance. And so in other countries where you've seen, as in Portugal and elsewhere, you see it regulated by the government, you also see the government taxing it appropriately, as we deal with alcohol. And so one of the questions, the long-standing question is, these drugs, none of them are as destructive to human health or public health as alcohol, and yet we deal with them in a completely different way than alcohol, much more severe.
Well,
so why not just do
But do you see, when you were making this film, do you see that the momentum is shifting towards legalizing it? I mean, do you expect that there are going to be more states? Because, I mean, these initiatives have been initiated and failed in several states, like Alaska, like in other states that I can't think about right now, but there have been several. So, I mean, is this really do you see that momentum shifting?
I do see the momentum shifting, and when you talk about the celebrities attached to the film, they're just one of many, many, many people, from Grover Norquist all the way to Al Sharpton, who are now finding common cause in saying the drug war is both morally wrong, but it's also a tremendous and dangerous waste of money for the country that we can't afford. I would say it this way.
Wait, you mean Grover Norquist?
Grover Norquist is against the drug war. So
against what? Well, everybody's. What do you mean against the drug war?
Against the criminalization of nonviolent people for drugs. So you see that broadly across the country right now. Our explosive problem in this country is that we incarcerate the nonviolent as though they were violent. That's what's caused us to have 2.3 million people behind bars, more than any other nation on earth.
That's the single biggest. You say that's the biggest cost to the economy? You're saying that is the biggest cost to the economy?
It's the biggest force behind why we've had an explosive prison population. So in other words, our prison population since 1971 increased 700%.
Right.
The dominant force that caused that was, under the drug war, the incarceration of the nonviolent. So when you look
comes at a cost, is what you're saying?
Unbelievable cost. It's tens of billions a year that we spend on this thing. For what gain? It doesn't make a product. It doesn't make something we can sell. It just hurts our population, makes our demand continue unabated. So countries like Mexico are suffering horrendously because our demand is so robust, because it's like a problem we haven't dealt with. We threw the wrong solution at it.
All right, Eugene, thanks so much for stopping by. Certainly, we don't get a chance too often to talk about this topic, so appreciate it.
Thank you.
Eugene Jarecki, the director of The House I Live In. Now,